warm myself a jet. So I've seen so many founders and so many entrepreneurs make the same mistake over and over and over again. They get an idea, they end up spending tens of thousands of pounds or dollars, wasting so much of their time, whether that's weeks, months, sometimes even years, actually building something, and then going live, launching it, and realizing they've got no users or they've got no buyers. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you've also got some people who actually spend a couple of weeks validating this idea that they've had, building up a strong wait list of clients who potentially want to then purchase it off them before they've even written a single line of code. So there's a serious difference between these two types of individuals. The ones that waste all their time, money, and effort fall in love with the solution, whereas the ones who actually validate the idea, they fall in love with the actual problem itself and validate the demand first. So here's the brutal truth. So your business idea, no matter how brilliant you think it is, has about a 5% chance of making you money if you just build it and hope people are going to be purchasing it. But there's a systematic way to flip those odds in your favor. So in this video, I'm going to run you through a 5-step framework that separates winning businesses from expensive mistakes. And by the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to test one of these ideas in a matter of weeks, rather than having to spend loads of time, loads of effort, and loads of money building it, hoping that people are actually going to buy it off you. So let's go. So before we dive into the actual frameworks itself, let's understand what validation actually is. So market validation isn't about asking your friends or family whether they think your idea is good, because they're just going to tell you what you want to hear. Real validation comes when you can prove that real people actually want to purchase your product or your solution. So think about it like this. Would you rather spend 6 months building something you don't know people are actually going to want to buy? Or would you rather spend 6 weeks, probably even less, maybe even like 3 weeks, if you can do it in about 10 days, proving people want it before you actually then go and buy it? So the answer, I think, is pretty obvious, yet most entrepreneurs or founders tend to skip this really crucial step. So let's dive into these 5 steps. So first of all, you need to set the foundations. So you've had an idea, now you can actually look to write down your goals, write down your assumptions, and write down your hypotheses. Now this might sound a little bit basic, but loads of people have never actually written down what they think the potential of their business idea actually is and who they potentially think is going to be purchasing it. They often have vague thoughts like floating around, but they've never really forced themselves to really dive deep into the specifics. So here's what you need to document. First of all, what's the core value of your product? So not just what it does, it's what transformation it actually provides. So for example, don't just say, I'm building a fitness app. Go in a little bit more detail, and you can say, I help busy professionals lose 20 pounds within a 90-day period without having to go to the gym. Secondly, who exactly is your target audience? And I mean exactly. So not just small business owners, because that's not really that specific, to be honest with you. Dive a little bit deeper and look for instance, solar service providers earning between $50,000 to $150,000 per year who are struggling with client acquisition. Ta-da! That's specific. Thirdly, what assumptions are you making about these people? Write them down. I assume they check Instagram every single day. They might be using TikTok. I assume they're willing to pay $90 per month to gain access to my platform. And I assume they currently use spreadsheets to track whatever it is. And then fourthly, what hypothesis do you have about the pricing and the business model? So I believe people will pay a monthly subscription rather than a yearly subscription or an upfront fee. And I think the ideal price is going to be $100 per month, as an example. Now, here's why this actually matters. So every single assumption you make is actually a risk. By writing these down, you can actually systematically address and actually test each individual one. So you're not necessarily just building your business off of a random idea. You're actually going in deep and you're testing all of your beliefs before building. So step 2 is assessing the market size. Now, a lot of people tend to think I can just build something and see what happens without actually testing a lot of this stuff beforehand. But you really do, if you actually want to build something valuable, you need to ensure that you've actually got a decent enough size of market in order to actually scale a business. This is actually going to save you a hell of a lot of time as well. Now, here's how to do this without getting overwhelmed and doing too much complex research. So you start with your TAM, SAM, and SOM framework. Now, TAM is your total addressable market, which is basically the entirety of all of your audience or people who could potentially purchase your product. SAM is your serviceable addressable market, which is the portion you could realistically reach and target. And SOM is your serviceable obtainable market, the portion you can actually penetrate and capture within the first 3 to 5 years of the actual business. So a good example of this is Casper. Their main product is basically just a mattress. So their TAM is pretty much everyone who sleeps on a bed, but they're not going to be able to actually go after that and penetrate that in one simple swoop. their SAM was starting to look at, okay, who is actually willing to purchase mattresses online without having tested them first in store, which back then in, I think, 2014 was not that big of a number. And then their SOM was the percentage of online mattress purchasers they could capture with their specific positioning. Premium foam mattresses with 100-day free trials. So here's a bit of a shortcut that you can use as well that are already serving your market. You can look at their estimated revenues using something like SimilarWeb or even just Google. If you can find several companies doing multi-millions in terms of revenue, then you know that there is a decent market to go after and capture. But there's a few key insights that people often miss. You don't necessarily need to have a massive market in order to actually build a profitable business. Now, you don't necessarily need a massive market if you can actually start to capture a decent amount of market share. So you'd rather have a 50% share of a $200 million market other than a 0.01% market share of a $1 billion market. And here's a super quick validation trick. If you can identify at least 10,000 people who are currently paying for a similar sort of product to yours, then you've pretty much got a viable market. So step 3 is search demand. So this is where you want to research how much actual search volume for the related terms is going on. Now think about this as doing a little bit of detective work. Again, just using Google. You don't necessarily have to have super amazing tools. I mean, there's a lot of different tools that you can utilize as well to help you with this, but just use Google to start off with. A lot of time, people's search behaviors actually kind of showcase a little bit more about their actual needs and wants and desires. Now, Google Keyword Planner is really good for this. RFs is good for this, or even there's a free version of something called Ubersuggest as well. But here's something that a lot of people get wrong. They only look at direct product searches from their potential customers. Instead, search for problem-based keywords. So if you're building a project management tool, don't just search project management tools, search for how to organize team tasks, project tracking spreadsheets, or team communication problems. So a real world example of this, a client of ours actually wants to create a course for email marketing. They started off by searching email marketing courses rather than actually going after particular problems or rather than searching for the problems itself. So the volume was fairly good for email marketing courses, which is like, okay, great, people are actually searching that. But when we started to look at the problems, which was how to write emails in a more effective way, how to write emails that convert, email open rates are far too low, my email list isn't making sales, we found thousands of monthly searches for this, and there was much less competition. High intent means more sales. And here's a pro tip. Keep an eye on question-based searches as well. So things like how do I, or why does my? Because this is actually expressing frustration at that particular moment in time. And that frustration represents opportunity to sell. Now, the goal itself for this section, or this part of the theory, is not necessarily to try to find something with the highest amount of volume. It's actually to find evidence whether or not your market is seeking a new solution to this problem. Now, before we move on to step 4, there's something I just want to address. Now, validation is just one small piece of how to build an actual scalable business. Once you've validated your idea and you're starting to build and you're hopefully moving towards profitability, the real challenges start to come when you're trying to scale this. And that is exactly why we set up DD Ventures. Now, DD Ventures, we've actually built a 24-step process, which is going to help you build a really scalable business, a really profitable business. So head over to dd.ventures. There'll be a link in the comments below. So let's get back to it. Now, step 4, I personally think is the most important thing to do, and that is customer interviews. This is where most of the validation actually comes from. It's also where a lot of people tend to mess it up. Now, a lot of this actually comes down to how you're going to be actually asking these questions to your audience or to your potential customers. So firstly, let's talk about who to interview. And no, do not just go and ask friends and family, because again, they are just going to tell you what you want to hear. They're going to say your idea is amazing. Yeah, they'd pay this much money, but when it actually comes to the sale and when it comes to actually charging them, they're not going to pay you. And then you'd have wasted so much time and effort. So you need to be talking to people who are actually experiencing your problem or who have experienced your problem and actually have the ability to pay for it. So you've got to be interviewing qualified prospects. And here's how you can find them. So you can post in relevant Facebook groups, you can check through Reddit, you can look on Twitter, you can look through LinkedIn. There's loads of different ways that you can actually start trying to figure out where your potential customers hang out, and then just offer them $10 voucher to start having some simple interviews with you. Now, the most crucial part is the questions you're going to be asking. I've seen loads of businesses and founders ask, oh, is this a product that you would use? Is this a product that you would pay for? Those are the wrong questions to ask, because everyone's just going to say yes or nothing or no constructive feedback whatsoever. Instead, try to ask about their current behaviors. So for instance, like, walk me through the last time you experienced this sort of problem. What tools did you use to actually overcome it? What's the most frustrating part about this process of using that tool? How much time did it take for you to figure out how to solve that problem? How much did it actually cost to solve that problem? And if that wasn't a success to the actual problem itself, if it wasn't a solution, what would have been needed in order to make it a solution? So now that you've actually figured out what their real problem is and how they're trying to solve it, then dive even further deeper into the actual solution of it or their current solutions. And this can be things like, what tools are you using to solve this at the moment? How much do they cost? What do you actually like about this product? What's the best feature you like it? What's the worst feature? What drives you crazy about it? Have you tried other solutions? And if they've actually stopped using that, why did they stop? Once you've started to figure this out, you can then move on to their actual behaviors as well. For instance, like, when was the last time they actually bought some software or some tools to help them solve this problem? Have they actually gone and spoken to some consultants to help them try to solve this problem? What is the actual decision-making process like for them as an individual or a business? And who else is actually involved in that decision-making process? We've got a whole section on the decision-making unit as well as part of the educational course. Again, I'll leave the actual link in the comments below. And then you can always finish off with this golden question. So if I could solve whatever their stated problem is, then what would that be worth to you? Don't ask them, oh, would you pay $5 a month or would you pay $2,000 if I could solve this? Ask them what it would be worth. And that's going to really start to help you understand and gauge how much you can actually charge for your product or your solution. Then it's all about repetition. You've got to be looking to speak to a minimum of 10 to 15 different people or organizations, and you'll start to realize there's some patterns in what they're saying as well. And if multiple people are actually saying the same sort of frustrations, they use the same workarounds or express the same willingness to pay, then you're definitely onto something. Watch out for polite responses because they're a waste of your time. At the start of the interviews, I often just say, please just give me the complete honest answer because it's going to help us anyway. People who are saying, yeah, it sounds interesting, or when are you going to be building this, or when is it going to be released? That's showing a little bit of excitement from them, a little bit of intent from them. And then in order to actually transition them into a paying customer, try to get them to actually pay you a deposit. Then you can get some cash up front to actually utilize to build the thing. You can often give them discounts or even early access and then use those people to help you refine the product itself. And they'll actually love it, to be honest with you, because they'll often actually see this as, this company is actually trying to build a product specifically for me, but lo and behold, it's not just them who actually have this problem and need that solution. Also, try to record all of these interviews you're doing because you can often actually utilize those for testimonials and things like that at a later date, plus just look through everything as you're going through and building the product itself. Now, step 5, MVP testing, or minimum viable product. Now, this is a bit of the fun part. So hopefully you've started to get a little bit of an idea around what your actual potential customers need, like what your solution is going to be looking like. Build a really, really basic MVP. So it does not need to be all bells and whistles. It doesn't even need to be a working solution. It can be as simple as a Figma or just a clickable through product, potentially even just a presentation, just showcasing different screen grabs of, okay, to get from here, the problem, to here, the problem being solved, it's going to take you these 3 or 5 steps. See if that actually fits their needs. And if they're excited by that, happy days. Now, there's a few different ways you can also then test this out. There's simple things like a landing page that you can sort out. And there's loads of different websites that you can use for a landing page. There's like Wix.com. You can use something called Kit. You could use Circle. You can even just build one yourself. You can got all of these different AI tools out there who can simply spin up a simple website for you, or even a platform in a matter of seconds. Things like Lovable. You've got Base44, there's V0, there's an endless amount of technology or endless amount of tools that can just help you get this sorted. So the key with these landing pages is not necessarily to get people to utilize that product because it's probably not going to be working properly anyway. It's mainly just to drive targeted traffic. And this can be done through things like Facebook groups, again, like Reddit. It can be across different social media channels. If you're creating content yourself, for instance, you can then push them towards it as well. Next up is Concierge MVP. Now, this is basically just a manual delivery of your solution to that problem. So you can then ask them, as long as you understand what their problem is, you can manually provide them with the potential solution and say, if I was able to productize this, the product looks roughly like this. Is that something that would be interesting? From doing the actual consulting or manual work first, you'll really start to understand the problem even more, and then you'll be able to figure out a better solution to it by productizing it. So there's a few key metrics you need to be tracking during this testing phase. Conversion rate from visitor to an interested prospect, number of people willing to actually put a pre-order down or a deposit, time between initial interest and then purchase, quality of the feedback and how specific they are about that feedback, and then retention and engagement with your test version. Most importantly, just be ready to pivot and adjust your product according to all of this feedback that's coming through. The goal here is not to prove that your idea was perfect. It's to discover what people actually want so you can then build the product around that. Okay, let's put all of this together. Now with this, you can create a validation scorecard. Again, I'll add a link in the comments below where you can actually build out this scorecard and take one of our templates. So now that you understand each step, so the 5 main steps of getting this validated, here's a simple framework to score any sort of business idea. It's basically called the validation scorecard. Now, what you want to do is rate each one out of 1 to 5. First off, we've got market size. Can you identify at least 10,000 people who actually have this problem and are willing to pay for it? Search demand. Are people actively searching for this? Problem severity. Based on interviews, how painful is this problem for people? How much are they willing to pay? Buying intent. Have people actually expressed an interest in your product or your solution for this problem? And a lot of that actually comes from the interview stages. Competitive advantage. What makes your approach different or better than your competitors? And execution ability. Do you have the skills, the network, and the resources to be able to actually execute on building this incredible product or solution? Now, scoring each one from 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being fantastic. So we've got 6 different questions or 6 different sections within this. Any idea scoring below an 18, you probably need to rethink it, maybe pivot, or have some further thought process around what it is that you're trying to do. Ideas scoring a 24 or above are probably worth pursuing. Now, validation is not something you need to just do once right at the start. Whenever you actually build a product, you want to be constantly speaking to your customers and audience, trying to understand their problems even further, because that's going to allow you to start building further product features or additions to the actual initial solution that you've built. So the entrepreneurs, from my experience, who actually succeed are the ones who turn the validation into a really strong habit and are just constantly talking to their customers. So here's some common validation mistakes you need to avoid. So mistake number 1, they ask friends and family for feedback. Mistake number 2, falling in love with your solution and not falling in love with the problem. Mistake number 3, confusing interest with buying intent. That's a great idea. Doesn't actually equal, I'll pay for that. Only count on people who are going to be putting skin into the game and paying you for this product. Mistake number 4, validating the wrong market segment. So always make sure you're talking to people who have that specific problem and are actually able to pay you for it. There was a business that I spoke to a while ago. He figured out that these students actually had a big problem. Yes, his solution actually solved that problem, but the big problem that he had was they cannot pay him for it. It's a simple PSP problem. Problem, solution, payment. Can't pay for it, there's no point building it. And mistake number 5, stopping validation too early. Always make sure you're doing all 5 steps frequently, not just the ones you feel more comfortable with. And again, a lot of people tend to try to leave out the actual customer interviews because more often than not, if they're a little bit scared, a little bit hesitant, they're going to get told something that they don't want to hear. Okay, now let's conclude. Now, if you've got an idea, perfect. Spend this week trying to complete this validation task. Writing down your goals, your assumptions, your hypothesis. Be brutally honest with yourself as well. Then you can actually start to work your way through the rest of the validation steps. Now, if you found this validation framework helpful, please do subscribe, give us a like, and then drop a comment below. I'm super interested in seeing what you guys are actually going to be building and see if there's anything that we can do to actually help you scale your businesses more effectively. Thanks for watching. I'll see you at the next one.